Imagine you're holding a piece of paper. A simple document. One rule written on it, one single investing rule that the most powerful financial institutions on Wall Street tried to bury. They called it dangerous. They called it irresponsible. One brokerage firm sent a letter to regulators demanding it be outlawed. And yet, the man who created this rule died one of the most respected investors in the history of capitalism. The man who followed this rule most faithfully turned $100 into more than 80 billion. So what was it? What was this rule so threatening that the entire financial establishment wanted it erased from existence? You are about to find out. But first, you need to understand the man. Because without knowing what Benjamin Graham survived, you cannot understand why he created something so radical, so dangerous, so undeniably right. This is not just a story about money. This is a story about a boy who watched his family fall into absolute ruin. A young man who stared into the void of financial destruction, not once, but twice, and came out the other side holding a lantern for every investor who would come after him. This is the story of the rule they tried to kill. And the legend they could never stop. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If someone handed you one rule, just one, that could protect your money from almost any crash, any panic, any market catastrophe, would you use it? Even if Wall Street told you not to? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if you're new here, subscribe and leave a like. It genuinely helps more than you know. The year is 1895. London, England. A boy is born into a Jewish family that carries the weight of centuries of wandering and survival in its blood. His name at birth is Benjamin Grossbaum. His father is a merchant. The family lives comfortably, not rich, but stable. Safe. Or so they believe. When Benjamin is just 1 year old, his family makes a fateful decision. They pack everything and sail to New York City, chasing the same dream that millions of immigrants carried across that cold, gray Atlantic. America. Possibility. A new name. Benjamin Grossbaum becomes Benjamin Graham. For a few years, it works. His father builds a modest import business. The family lives in a pleasant apartment. Young Benjamin reads voraciously, Greek, Latin, philosophy, mathematics. His mind is extraordinary, already running ahead of every room he enters. And then, in 1903, his father dies. Benjamin is 9 years old. Just 9 years old, and the floor of his world drops away completely. Within months, the family's finances collapse. His mother tries everything. She opens a boarding house, she attempts to trade stocks on margin, she borrows money she cannot repay. The crash of 1907 wipes out whatever is left. Benjamin Graham watches his mother weep. He watches furniture get carried out of their apartment by creditors. He watches his family sink from comfort into the kind of poverty that leaves marks you never fully lose. He is 12 years old. And he makes a silent, burning promise to himself: he will understand money. He will master it. He will never, ever let this happen again. That kind of wound doesn't heal. It transforms. Graham earns a scholarship to Columbia University. He graduates second in his class at the age of 20. 3 different departments beg him to stay: philosophy, English, mathematics. He turns them all down. He walks straight to Wall Street. Not because he loves money. Because he fears its absence. Because he has felt what happens when you don't understand the machine, and the machine grinds you up without hesitation. He joins a brokerage firm as a messenger boy, earning $12 a week. He is 20 years old, living in a city full of men in expensive suits who believe they can outsmart markets through intuition, through tips, through gut feeling. Graham watches them. He studies them. And he sees something that disturbs him deeply: none of them have a system. None of them have a framework. They are all, every single one, gambling. Dressed in fine clothes, speaking in confident voices, gambling with other people's money. He begins to build something different. He reads every financial report he can find. He digs into balance sheets at midnight. He develops the radical idea, radical, at the time, that a stock is not just a ticker symbol that goes up and down. A stock is a piece of a real business. And that business has a real, calculable value. Not the value the market assigns to it. Not the value of emotion, or fear, or greed. A real, fundamental value. He calls it intrinsic value. And here is where the story takes its first dark turn. By the late 1920s, Graham is managing his own investment partnership. He is doing well. Remarkably well. But he notices something deeply unsettling happening around him. The entire stock market is becoming untethered from reality. Stocks are trading at prices that have nothing to do with what the underlying businesses are actually worth. Ordinary people, shoe shiners, taxi drivers, secretaries, are borrowing money to buy stocks. Everyone is getting rich. Everyone believes this will last forever. Graham warns his clients. He reduces his exposure. He writes cautious memos. Nobody listens. October 1929. The market collapses. In the most catastrophic financial implosion in American history up to that point, fortunes are wiped out in hours. Banks fail. Businesses close. Men jump from buildings. The Great Depression swallows the country like a slow, terrible tide. And Benjamin Graham, the careful, the analytical, the brilliant Benjamin Graham, loses nearly everything. His fund drops over 70%. Not because he was reckless. Because even caution wasn't enough when the entire system fractured. He is 35 years old. He has a family to feed. His savings are shattered. And for the second time in his life, he is staring into that same abyss his mother once stared into. Cold. Dark. Absolute. Most men would have quit. Benjamin Graham did the opposite. He decided that what happened was not just a tragedy. It was a lesson. The most expensive, devastating lesson imaginable. And he was going to extract every ounce of wisdom from it, not for himself, but for every investor who would come after him. He goes back to basics. All the way back. He spends years rebuilding his framework, his system, his philosophy. And somewhere in that rebuilding, in the long quiet nights of calculation and reflection, he arrives at an idea that is so simple it feels almost naive. So pure it feels almost impossible. An idea that Wall Street, when they finally understand it, will try to suppress with the full weight of their institutional arrogance. The idea is this: never pay more for a business than it is worth. And always, always, demand a cushion between what you pay and what it's actually worth. A cushion so wide that even if you're slightly wrong, even if the business performs worse than expected, you still don't lose. He calls this cushion the margin of safety. 3 words. The margin of safety. Graham will later write that these 3 words are the most important words in investing. Not the most useful words. The most important. The foundation. The entire philosophy distilled into one elegant, unbreakable principle. And Wall Street hates it. Why? Because the margin of safety requires patience. It requires discipline. It requires you to walk away from investments that look exciting but aren't cheap enough. It requires you to sit on cash for months, sometimes years, waiting for prices to fall to levels that give you that cushion. In a world where brokers get paid on every transaction, patience is the enemy. In a world where fund managers are judged quarterly, long-term discipline is career suicide. The financial establishment doesn't just disagree with Graham's rule. They are threatened by it. Because if investors follow it, they won't need the expensive advice being sold to them by men in expensive suits. In 1934, Graham and his colleague David Dodd publish a book called Security Analysis. Over 800 pages of dense, rigorous financial theory. It sells modestly at first. But slowly, quietly, it begins to spread through the investing community like underground fire. The serious investors, the ones who actually want to understand what they're doing, devour it. They study it like a sacred text. Because it is, in its way, the first time anyone has ever told the truth about what investing actually requires. Not luck. Not tips. Not intuition. Discipline. Analysis. Patience. And always, always, the margin of safety. Graham's fund begins to recover. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But steadily, year after year, grinding forward with the quiet power of compound interest and rational decision-making. While others chase the next hot stock, Graham buys ugly, overlooked, undervalued companies at prices so low that the margin of safety is almost absurdly wide. And he waits. And he waits. And eventually, every single time, the market figures out what he already knew. By the 1940s, he is wealthy again. Truly wealthy. Not from luck. From the relentless, disciplined application of a principle that everyone else refused to take seriously. But the most important chapter of his legacy is not his own wealth. It is a young man from Omaha, Nebraska, who walks into Graham's classroom at Columbia University in 1950. His name is Warren Buffett. He is 19 years old. He has already read Graham's book, twice. He reads it again after every class. When Graham grades his papers, he gives Buffett the only A+ he has ever awarded in 20 years of teaching. Graham sees something in this young man that goes beyond intelligence. He sees a hunger. A devotion. He sees himself, 30 years younger, sitting at the feet of a master he has yet to find. Buffett later says that reading Graham's work was like finding a roadmap in the dark. Like someone had handed him the answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. He absorbs the margin of safety not as a rule but as a religion. He applies it with an obsessiveness that even Graham finds impressive. He buys companies so cheap, so deeply discounted from their intrinsic value, that the downside is almost non-existent. And the upside is generational wealth. We all know what Buffett becomes. The greatest investor in history. Richer than almost any human being who has ever lived. And every time someone asks him what the secret is, every time, he says the same thing. He learned it from one man. Benjamin Graham. And the secret is the margin of safety. 3 words. The rule they tried to bury. The rule that built an empire. But here is something most people never learn about Graham, something that makes the story cut even deeper. In his final years, Graham himself begins to question whether even his own methods are complicated enough. He starts to wonder if the margin of safety, applied with simplicity, might be even more powerful than the elaborate analysis he built his career on. He tells colleagues that a simple formula, buying stocks that are cheap by almost any measure and holding them with patience, might outperform all the sophisticated approaches he spent decades developing. He is, in essence, saying that the truth he discovered was even simpler than he made it look. That the greatest rule in investing is not complex. It is not secret. It is not locked behind an algorithm or a Bloomberg terminal or a hedge fund strategy with a 100-page prospectus. It is just 3 words. And the discipline to honor them when every emotion in your body is screaming at you to do something else. He dies in 1976, at the age of 82. Quietly, in France, where he spent his final years. He leaves behind 2 masterworks, Security Analysis and The Intelligent Investor, that will be read and reread by serious investors for as long as capitalism exists. He leaves behind Warren Buffett and dozens of other disciples who together manage hundreds of billions of dollars using the principles he forged in the fire of his own suffering. And he leaves behind the margin of safety. The rule they tried to prohibit. The rule that could not be killed. Think about what that means for you. Right now. Today. In a world of infinite financial noise, of crypto pumps and meme stocks and day trading influencers and FOMO and panic selling and quarterly earnings hysteria, one man, born into poverty, shattered by loss, rebuilt by discipline, figured out the answer. And he wrote it down. And he gave it away. The margin of safety is not about being afraid to invest. It is about being so rational, so honest about the difference between price and value, that fear and greed simply cannot reach you. When the market panics and prices crash, the margin of safety investor doesn't run. He shops. When the market is euphoric and prices are detached from reality, the margin of safety investor doesn't chase. He waits. And in the waiting, in that disciplined, almost inhuman patience, the money quietly, relentlessly, compounds. Benjamin Graham was never the most exciting investor. He was never flashy. He never predicted crashes on television or made dramatic calls that made headlines. He just did the same thing, correctly, over and over again, for decades. He understood that investing is not a performance. It is not entertainment. It is not a game of who is smartest in the room. It is the quiet accumulation of advantage over time by people who refuse to be manipulated by their own emotions. That boy who watched his family's furniture get carried out by creditors, he turned that wound into wisdom. That wound into a shield. Not just for himself. For every investor who would ever have the courage to listen. The next time the market drops and everyone around you is terrified, remember Benjamin Graham. The next time a hot stock catches your eye and you feel that rush of temptation, remember Benjamin Graham. Ask yourself, what is this business actually worth? What am I paying? And is the gap between those two numbers, the margin of safety, wide enough that even if I'm wrong, I still survive? If the answer is yes, you invest. If the answer is no, you wait. That's it. That's the secret. The rule they tried to prohibit. The rule that made a legend. The rule that built the greatest investor who ever lived. 3 words, forged in suffering, tested in crisis, proven across a century of markets. The margin of safety. Benjamin Graham never cared about being famous. He cared about being right. And in the end, being right was the most powerful thing a person could be. The market will test you. It always does. It will tempt you and terrify you and try to make you forget everything you know. But somewhere in the pages Graham left behind, in the story of a boy who lost everything and built something eternal from the ruins, is the reminder that the investor who survives is not the one who is smartest, it is the one who is most disciplined. Most patient. Most honest about the difference between what something is worth and what someone is willing to pay for it. That is the legacy of Benjamin Graham. Not billions of dollars. Not a famous name. A way of seeing clearly in a world designed to make you blind. And that, in the end, is worth more than anything.